Was it?
I'm sorry.
That was great.
No sound. Yeah, it's just the slide. Okay. The difference is, and I don't know if there's an opportunity to change it, but one of my assistants wasn't able to make it. There's a family emergency, so I don't know if I can edit it, but if I can, then I'll put in somebody else is stepping in.
Yeah,
to take
you
her spot.
go. You do what you need to do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. Is it gonna let me edit? Yeah, it sure is. Oh boy, I hope I can spell his name right.
Feel free to grab some citrus.
Oh, thank you. Claire, can you help me spell Michael's last name? Is it Murphey? Oh, Y. Just Y. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. And then, ta-da!
Perfect.
Awesome.
All right, you're ready to rock and roll.
Very good. And I appreciate the thoughts on presenter mode too.
Hey,
That's
nope.
great. Thank you.
Came up that way.
Yeah, that's great. That's absolutely okay, as long as you don't mind my grocery bags.
I think that is who I was talking about. I'm pretty sure it's glasses, but they put he was wearing around his neck. That is so I feel stupid. I must have just like come across this.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Because I had an idea of these now, so I can't say. Right. Really emphasized here. I can pull it right now. Thank you. Perfect. And if you like the first year there, I don't know.
Okay, I will probably
I like the soup. That girl who came up and spoke to me at the table, she was in America for so long. She was in wherever community capital is, it's like a small. And so, I don't know if I'm not qualified for traditional laws to look at what I would say her. But, yeah, well, she would bring her. We had that this training, it's like, okay, I was statewide training. So, yeah. She signed on to do a second year for the organization. Like, it's not weird. It's just not, yeah. Some people are like, okay, here's
Well, you can see them and they're still be on the chair.
Are these yours? Yes. Sorry.
There's another pad over there, but you were sitting right here.
Yeah, here's my pen. I think. Is that yours? You might be my pen. Nope, you can have it because this one's mine. That's yours. Be yours.
I was in this one. I was in this one before.
got it.
I would run you home.
We'll do a thorough check afterwards.
Okay.
You can, so on Kathy's slides. So I took notes on that.
We have snacks.
That kind of pace.
Yeah.
Jenna Williams knows me.
Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
It's just the season.
It really is.
But no panic.
I will. It'll be good. Absolutely.
So I'm pretty happy. Because Wayne was gonna do Walmart.
So let's see, we need at least 6 people. So now you guys can leave.
Now on his own. He's gone and done. I gave him our tax ID number in case they like question him. Because they don't recognize it. I mean, usually it's me and Donna standing there, right? So.
Hi, how are you? Good.
It must have gone fine. Yeah. We just gave it to I'm so used to sitting on these ones.
You can stand right there if that's comfortable for you.
It's good to see you. Well, it's raining outside.
Oh, thanks. Well, take deep breaths. Hold.
And then with delay to the time I should start. So I think it was 2:20, so 2:30.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you still have 6
Go
minutes.
grab a glass of water.
Sure.
Okay.
I meant to more Donna.
I told you.
Oh, you
Extra
did?
box.
What'd she say? Well, we're yeah.
It's rumbling, and she knows it's real. It's rumbling loud.
I just was gonna warn her that she doesn't have to. I went to bag yesterday and I was so excited to leave. Yeah, and I just didn't know she's gonna go out, wash her hands. Yeah. Oh. What'd she say? I tell you, people were complimenting. People do. You don't want them today.
These are the diehards.
Diana has some nice things. I won't tell you now. No, I'm sorry.
As I advance the slides.
So if you want, since I'm sitting here, I can click start for you.
I can also, I'll just like,
No.
if I
Oh, you could.
click on me, I also have an assistant, and if I can have her maybe sit here in front of you. Claire?
Some people, it's like the carpet is soaking wet, well, like there wasn't a blanket under it, like it wasn't in a construction area.
Oh.
Want to talk? Oh, yeah. Where? I erased it and wrote happy Easter, and then now it says kitchen cupboard not for tears. You're the best or something. No one can see it. Because that's usually. Oh, where? They must have. Or where? People do that. I wonder if there's any in our town. I guess they're more putting up new walls. Yeah. A lot of times they'll be
It's just gonna be a little bit of introduction, and then we'll get to the. Perfect.
So let me know when you're ready and I'll.
Oh, perfect, thank you. Yeah, we'll get started right on time. And I will do my best to get people out of here at 3:30, so I'll probably nip and tuck a little bit.
Okay.
It's a long day.
Yeah. The final session of the day. This is the, just so you know, this is the Utilizing Cultural Responsiveness and Hunger Relief and Food Security Improvement Activities Workshop. And Dr. Farrell Burtman, from the UBM will be presenting. But before I turn it over to her, just a few more details before we close out the day at the end of the session. Obviously, you guys are familiar with the evaluations, so please fill those out. Those really help us plan every year the conference. And also, since this is the last session of the conference, if you could hand Chris Foster and I your name tags at the end of the session, and then we can collect them and deal with them. And we also have a little parting gift for you as well. So just stop by the doorway on your way out. And with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm a big fan of making sure everybody in the room has access without having to advocate for themselves. Hey, back row, you're okay? Great. Well, welcome. First of all, you guys, kudos to you. Last session of a long but wonderful and interesting conference. So thank you for taking time to be here today. I'm Farrell Burtman. A little bit about my background. I am a faculty member at the University of Vermont. I am a registered dietitian, and my classes include community nutrition, nutrition education and counseling, nutrition in the life cycle, as well as a new class I created called Human Health in the Food System. My research includes working directly in food insecurity and hunger relief. I am particularly invested in marginalized populations, and I want to let you know ahead of time the different cultural groups I will be discussing with you, I do not personally identify with. I think that that is a great limitation. It is something that I advocate for, that there are more people of these cultural identities in my seat. Unfortunately, today, there is not somebody of that identity who could present to you, so here I am. I will do my best to be authentic in my understanding of these cultures, and I'm going to rely on your knowledge to fill in any of my gaps. I'm going a little off the cuff because I want to build on a discussion earlier today, and I think it's really appropriate. So as you know, our first key presenter was Paul Bourne, and if you stayed for the second workshop, he was discussing his book, Deepening Community. He read a quote, and I think that it is a great segue. But before I do so, I want to also mention that I have two wonderful assistants with me today who will be helping me with the hands-on portion of the workshop. First, I want to thank Claire for joining me today. Here's Claire and Michael over in the corner. And the really cool thing was they were my seniors last year, and they continued on to graduate school, and I'm so excited I get to work with them again today in this. So without further ado, I'm going to do my best to read this passage because I think it's a great segue. The question is, what is the most important thing people can do to make a difference in the world? That's simple, I almost always reply, I being Paul. Bring chicken soup to your neighbor. Really? Is the typical response? I say yes, then add, but remember, I said the answer is simple, but the act of bringing soup, well, that takes work. How so? It requires that you know your neighbor. It requires that you know they are not vegetarian and like soup. It requires that you know them well enough and communicate regularly enough to know that they are sick. Once you know they are sick, you must feel compelled to want to help and to make this a priority among the many calls on your time and energy. Your neighbor must know you well enough to feel comfortable in receiving your help. And you must have enough of a relationship to know that what they prefer when they are sick, whether it is chicken soup, pho, chana masala, or even ice cream. Today I want to explore that level of knowledge. I want to encourage you to empathize with the people that you're working with. Ask questions to better understand who they are. And I posit that if you take that time, you will help with a very big issue that we're dealing with internationally, which is malnutrition. So with that, I'm going to start my introduction. Oops, back one, please. Thank you. So I love to give a roadmap because who likes to sit in a talk and not know when it's going to end, right? Well, first of all, I want to have a contract with you. I know we're running 10 minutes late. I'm going to pick up my pace because at 3:30, I think that we should be able to all adjourn, but also receive the knowledge that we came for. So I'm going to try to pick up my pace so that we stay on time. In the meantime, I would like to just kind of clear the expectations around what these different terms are. I will share with you my definition, so we're all at the same starting place. So we will discuss food security and hunger as well as culture and diversity, and then we're going to really dive into this cultural responsiveness. I'll share with you a brief case study, and then we're going to talk about common Vermont client foodways, and then I'm going to have you break up into groups of 3. No, you cannot exit at that point. You have to stay. Groups of 3. Of course, you can go if you want to, but groups of 3, and then you're going to practice some of the skills that I'm sharing with you today, and then you're going to build off of your own personal knowledge. And then if we have time, we'll report back on our experiences, and then we'll be done. And then you'll know it's time to go, because we're done, and I have a new slide. So what is the bottom line? What am I trying to upsell here? I want your program that you're working on to improve access for vulnerable families, and it should recognize and address culturally appropriate food. And I'll explain why that's so important. And there's a star. Please remember that. I'll remind you again later. My definition of food security is based off of a definition that's been cited over 800 times. This definition comes from a fellow registered dietitian, Dr. Anderson, and it's the same definition that's used by the USDA. So I would argue it's a pretty common definition. Access by all household members at all times to enough food for an active, healthy life. That's where most places stop. I would like you, though, to continue and think about the following. Ready availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods, as well as the ability to acquire foods, in socially acceptable ways. Now, there's a lot of different caveats for socially acceptable. What I'm hoping that you'll leave here with is the idea that making sure it's culturally appropriate is also part of being socially acceptable for that family that you're serving. Updated their definition around hunger. I'll keep it short, but I would like to make sure we have that that we can differentiate the two. When we talk about hunger, we're specifically talking about an individual level physiological condition that might result from food insecurity. So when we talk about hunger relief, this is what we are going to be working on. I would argue that I aspire to food security, and that's where my work is heading. Here's the big one, malnutrition. Malnutrition is often thought of in our profession, my profession. They think that it is somebody who's wasted, who's underweight, who's stunted, who's thin. And I would argue that is not the whole picture. Malnutrition also occurs if the person that you're serving is not receiving proper amounts of micronutrients. And this is where we can bring in the hunger-obesity paradox. You get a lot of energy-dense food, so you get the calories that you need, and maybe too many, but you're missing some of the micronutrients that is critical to thrive. How important is this? Hold on, I'm not ready for the next slide. I just had a wonderful meeting yesterday with that included the FAO. And they took a moment to talk about this, and it really stuck out, and I was like, boy, I better take this with me. So the FAO asked, why invest in nutrition? Big question. And they go on to say, malnutrition is the greatest impediment to the fulfillment of human potential. I don't care what religion or political group or where you live, what country you're in, if you serve in the military or not. I hope that we as Earthlings can all agree that an effort to help people fulfill their human potential is worthwhile. And I know I'm speaking to the choir, but join me in helping address malnutrition. And I believe that some of these cultural barriers can lead to malnutrition, and that's why I'm glad that you're here today. We'll discuss those. So what's culture? So culture kind of runs around, and we think about all sorts of different lenses and how do I define culture. This is where I would like us to come today as a group, as a community. So my definition of culture is the values, beliefs, attitudes, and practices accepted by a community or individuals. Culture is learned, not inherited. It is something that is constantly moving and evolving. Just because you are here, I could argue that perhaps your culture might evolve as well. So remember, when we're thinking about stereotypes, this is always evolving. And we're going to work with our clients on their path as they're developing their own culture and passing it on to their family members, because it's passed from generation to generation. Next one, please. So now, what is cultural diversity? Ways in which individuals are unique or different, but similar in other ways. And this is where we can really bring in the listening and the empathy, understanding what ties us together, but what makes us different. And in that cultural diversity, it allows us to grow. So here are some examples of culture in ethnic groups, races, and religions. But cultural diversity also includes genders, sexual orientation, educational level, age, marital status, lifestyle, values, socioeconomic status, physical ability, and this is a big one, body size. Really, really important, in my opinion, that we expand our acceptance of different body sizes. So we are already, in this room, a culturally diverse room. But I want to spend my time on those first 3 points. So what is this cultural responsiveness that you're coming to listen about? Cultural responsivity, oh, that's a hard one to say. Who wants to try it? Cultural
Responsiveness.
You're better than I am. Refers to the ability to learn from and relate respectfully to people from your own and other cultures. There are other names for it. You might hear it described as being culturally responsive, culturally competent, have diverse perspectives, be multicultural and inclusive. These are terms that describe, although they might each have their own different definition, these are all getting towards that same goal. So why is this important in Vermont? And pardon me, the text is a little bit small for you, so I'm actually going to get up because it's a little small for me too. I need new contacts. If you look at this again, this is what I want to point out. So in Vermont, our community members, right now, there are 26,156 immigrants in Vermont right now. 4.2% of Vermonters are foreign-born, and 2.7% of Vermonters designate themselves as Latino or Asian. So we do have a presence in Vermont, a smaller presence than where I was doing my doctoral work in Arizona, but still a presence that we must acknowledge and integrate into our food access services. So why is this helpful? What are the benefits? It increases level of comfort. You're already getting more comfortable with me, right? I couldn't pronounce that word. That was my diversity. That was my limitation. But by joining me and helping me say that word, we're starting to create empathy and a community of culture. I'm disabled, so I literally cannot say that word. And there's probably going to be other ones that I can't say either. But in this, sharing that vulnerability helps create community. Now you know a little bit more about me, and by talking to the clients that you're working with about their diversities and their needs, it increases your knowledge. I would argue that it increases all of our freedom. Right for autonomy is a key bioethical point. And as we know each other, we can allow each other to advocate for ourselves. And as you get to know each other, you empower people to be comfortable and trusting so that they can advocate for their needs. It also allows a capacity to teach. So I'm going to charge you with going back to your communities. If there's anything here that you find interesting, share that. Continue this conversation. Maybe take it back to your community partner and make sure that you, in your services, are more culturally responsive. So one of the key things in becoming culturally responsive is your own cultural self-awareness. Let's just take a minute to all be quiet together. One of the things that I find helps, I'm going to try to do this and not be too awkward, is to plant my feet on the floor, roll my shoulders back, and open up my body. Because nonverbals are also communicating with your partner. Maybe what I'm saying is leading you to kind of close off your body because it might be a little uncomfortable or new. But when you open up your body to the people that you're working with, you're already showing that you're open and receptive and ready to learn from them. So now I'd ask you just to take a moment quietly by yourself. You can have your eyes open or closed, and I want you to think about, what is your cultural identity? Who are you? Where are your ancestors from? What language do you speak? What makes you unique? We'll just take a moment to be quiet together. "20 seconds of quiet it feels a little bit long, doesn't it? We're not used to being quiet with each other and ourselves. I was going to make it a minute, but we all want to get out of here at 3:30, so I'm going to put the time a little bit there. Okay? But in that moment, you have allowed yourself to become more culturally aware and responsive. I hope maybe you were daydreaming about the drive north or the drive south, but maybe you were taking a moment to give yourself permission to think about who you are, where you're from, what language you speak. And by doing that and being self-aware, you are starting to build that respect that you're going to have and knowledge that you're going to have to work with other people, diverse viewpoints. Collectively as a community, we can come up with so many new and novel ideas than if we're just our own island. So creating this interaction will help you perform better in the job that you're doing. We'll bring in new perspectives, maybe new recipes, maybe new items, maybe new ways to connect with people who have not been coming to your services. Please make sure, however, in this trusting, open conversation, that you're listening, actively listening, and not imposing your own viewpoint. As a registered dietitian, I feel like I know what people need to do in order to be healthy. But what's more important is that you know yourself, for yourself, what works for you to become healthy. And if I'm quiet and I listen to you, you are going to have a lot of self-discovery. The same thing can happen for your clients, so allow for that instead of rushing in with solutions, with your own lens and your own ideals. Allow them to communicate with you. Let's leave it on this slide just for another moment. Has anybody heard of the golden rule? Is there anybody comfortable telling me what it is? I'm putting you on the spot. Anybody feel comfortable saying it? Thank you. Can we agree that that's a pretty good rule for humanity? I'm going to ask you, though, to take it up a level. How about the platinum rule? So here's the platinum rule. And it's not as eloquent as your rule. Treat others the way they want to be treated. So the platinum rule is instead saying, what do I think you need? It's saying, tell me what you need, and my service will meet you where you are. If you find out what respect means to others, you can serve them better, in my opinion. Next slide, please. So how do we get this knowledge? Well, there's some really fun things to do, and I know based on social media that Vermont goes to Pinterest more than any other social site. So maybe some of you guys go to Pinterest to look for recipes, great place. So you can check out diverse recipes on Pinterest. You could go to an ethnic grocery store. If you're up in the Chittenden County area, Winooski is fantastic. Other regions with ethnic grocery stores that people can share? Albany, wonderful.
Quincy, Massachusetts has a lot of Asian markets.
Okay, so Massachusetts, if you're heading down south, going way up to Montreal, that would be another one, right? Go to neighborhood events. So what is today? Cinco de Mayo. Is anybody going to a Cinco de Mayo party that actually includes people who self-identify as Latino Hispanic? Why don't you go out? I'll let you out at 3:30 so you can maybe find one of those events to go have fun. It's a great way to get to know people. Read recipe books, cook different foods, and visit websites like Pinterest. So ways to improve is first to examine your own self and your interactions with cultural biases. Build and support those cultural strengths in your food relief agency. Identify clients' primary cultural roles. Take time to understand what is their cultural origin. And then incorporate that culture into your nutrition education. Bring in some of those recipes and items. Learn as much as you can about the various cultures and the people that you serve. But accept your own naivety, as deeply embedded in that culture as you are. So there needs to be that dialogue so that you can grow together. So looking at the literature, because I do that, I'm a research scientist, I looked at some work coming out of, oh boy, now I can't remember, I think somewhere in the Midwest. But in the Midwest, there's a food group, and in 2012, they came up with some cultural competency, and they did a needs assessment. And this is what they did. They talked to their clients, and they asked for their client's perspective, and this is what they found out. From their client's perspective, there were barriers and issues around prepackaged foods and food shelves, around appointments, making and keeping appointments, scheduling appointments, any stigma around utilizing emergency food and food shelves, apprehension about the paperwork. So maybe you are in an agency that also tries to co-enroll people in other government programs. So recognize that there might be a barrier there. And also, it might be in a location that's not easy for somebody to travel to. Have staff that doesn't look like them, and volunteers that doesn't look like them. So another thing that you can do is encourage opportunities to diversify people in the agency, especially around larger cultural groups that you're serving. From the agency's perspective, this is what they found. They thought that procurement and cost of food that is culturally responsive is difficult. They are struggling with language barriers, according to the study, and there was a lack of knowledge around culturally appropriate foods. So here are the suggested solutions from the literature, from both of these sources. So sourcing familiar and appropriate foods could be very helpful in encouraging culturally diverse clients. Create walk-in distribution models. Have the choice mode of shopping where you get a basket and then you can go through and shop for through the food shelf. Create outreach and educational programs that are culturally sensitive, and make sure that you're always collaborating with those diverse ethnic groups. Bring them in, get that local knowledge, really expand in that area. That can be really helpful. I'm going to really briefly tell you a case study. So in preparing for this research that I conducted in Germany, I went out and I met with some people that are Syrian refugees, and I was gathering some of of this information while I was preparing for a deeper study that I did. And it was to help me get a deeper understanding. So I'm going to share with you very, very briefly 3 stories. So next slide, please. So in case you didn't know, it's been in the news, but in case you didn't know, as people left Syria, they would come up through Turkey, Greece, this area, and most people would walk. So they would walk all the way up, and if you click it again, right up here, this is where, at the very top, that triangle, that's where I conducted my research. So my research was understanding food security among Syrian refugees living in Germany. Next slide, please. As you probably know, in the fall of 2005, Germany changed their policy to really open up the doors to take in large amounts of Syrian refugees and refugees in general. So I came into this project in the fall of 2015. Next slide, please. This is the town hall in Kiel where I conducted my research. This is how they process people coming into the country. Is this not German or what? I mean, beautiful chairs. It's just classic. All right. So in this one person's house that I went to, I'll tell you briefly about him. He is a Syrian refugee male. He came to the country alone. Half of his family is in Lebanon. 2 of his family members are in Canada. He is Christian. He was a fashion designer, and he showed me all of the fashions that he would design. So he found that being in Germany was pretty easy to navigate since he was Christian. So he could have the different sauces and not worry about bacon and pork products. He did miss some of the fruits and vegetables from home. And in fact, we got out a German Arabic book, and he tried to show me what legume he missed, but it wasn't in the translation. And he made me coffee, so that was pretty cool. So this is actually his cabinet. This is where he was storing his food. One of the things I want you to notice is at this point in his experience, he did not have refrigeration, so all of his food was stored in this cabinet. And I also want you to note the halal symbol for later. Next one, please. So I'm going to tell you about the next person I met with. He was about 25. And he was also from Syria. He was Muslim. And when you come to Germany, when you originally arrive, you get about 500 euro. So unlike here where we have SNAP and you have money just for food allocation, that 500 needed to go for everything. And he was in a very stressful situation. So he was also smoking. So Germany also taxes tobacco at a very high rate. So he was saying that he really was just eating noodles. Noodles, no vegetables, and especially no meat. He said if he were to get meat, he would have to travel into the city, take a bus, and go to the one Turkish halal vendor. And he refused to get his meat anywhere else, even if it was labeled with the halal symbol, because he didn't know if it was produced properly. The third person we can see on the slide, the family I want to tell you about, is a family of 4. They're also from Syria. They told me they owned 2 houses and had servants before they were forced to leave. Really struggling, living on about $2,000 a month, going from that lifestyle. Their religious background was Yazidi, and there are some very similar rules around meat for that family. So they also described just eating eggs and noodles, and the kids were very skeptical about the school lunches. One of the things that came up in the Yazidi household that I thought was very interesting is this belief that if you have guests, you must feed the guests more food than they can eat, because that will bring you closer to God. So if you're already food insecure and you have limited resources, they said that they would have guests at least once a week and sometimes twice a week. So think about the food resources in that situation. So all in all, my biggest concern was protein, energy, malnutrition, especially in the people I was talking to who were waiting and only getting halal type meat products. Germany is starting to respond. So this is the regular grocery store. You can see that they're starting to bring culturally responsive foods to the store. This workshop today, it became clear that there were really 3 groups that I should focus on. So the first group that we're going to talk about is those of you who are interacting and serving Jamaican clients So we're going to talk about Caribbean diets. And again, my knowledge is from I work actually on an apple farm sometimes in the summer and grew up working on Allen Home Farm that also has people coming up from Jamaica. So growing up speaking to people, that is the extent of my experience. I have not been to Jamaica, although I would love to go. So here's a little bit of what I've learned so far. Jamaican foods are a combination of locally grown and imported ingredients. They bring in spices and flavors, and they're building off of several ethnic groups. And I thought that it was really interesting that they're bringing in Afrikaans, Chinese, and Indian flavors. According to a book called Traditional Food Preparation in Jamaica, there are two innovative traditional ways of preparing food, jerk and banana leaf wraps. So being a dietitian, I tried to break it down into popular foods. So fruits and vegetables, popular foods as far as I know, and your knowledge might be able to fill in the gap. Onions, cabbage, yellow yam, green bananas, okra, squash, potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, leafy greens, tropical fruits, and pineapple. Grains, the preference is white bread. That was really interesting. Protein foods include pork, beef, chicken, ham, goat, cod, chickpeas, kidney beans. Seasonings include thyme, oh, my timer is going off, ginger, garlic, pickles, allspice, which is also called pimento, ketchup, vinegar, and coconut milk. So the next food ways that I want to talk to you about is the Hispanic diet. So those of you who are working with clients who have a Latino ethnic background, I would like you to know, again, that what I think is incredibly interesting is that Mexican cuisine is as complex as any other world cuisine. So please don't try to just categorize it based on maybe what you would see at a Mexican fast food restaurant here. You're really not doing it justice. It is incredibly complicated and beautiful and incredible. There are ingredients that are native to Mexico, and there are also external influences. So as I mentioned, I lived in Arizona and did my research in Arizona for my doctorate. And some of these really hold true with what I was hearing from the people I was working with. So food is generally consumed at home with local ingredients. As a dietitian, I'm like, woo, woo, right? That's awesome. Let's not change that. And then generally speaking, and I'm generalizing here, but the main meal is supper served around midday, and it starts with a soup, like a chicken broth with pasta. Not brother, chicken broth. And then the main course is typically meat with a sauce. Next slide, please. So popular ingredients include corn, tomatoes, squash, zucchini, cauliflower, potatoes, spinach, Swiss chard, and mushrooms. The grain preference, from what I've experienced, is masa, which is a very fine corn meal, and pasta. Protein foods include pork, chicken, beef, cheese. I put in pinto beans, but I think it's a whole variety of beans. Maybe I was generalizing there. Seasoning, chili peppers, cocoa, vanilla, green onions, and I had to throw in cilantro. So good. And then there's fruit drinks made from fresh fruits and just, in the big jars, the watermelon. Oh, so good. So this is at least part of the story. Next slide. And then finally, the group that I'm spending a lot of time with now, and this is the Middle Eastern diet. Specifically, I'm going to focus in on the Muslim diet. So I would like to tell you briefly about halal. Halal is permission to use or engage in according to Islamic law. People would look for halal food certification, and it's really important that trust is achieved. That it is a butcher that they know, and a food product that they know. Even if you come in, I learned in Germany, and put the halal certification on, there has to be that trust, or else it will not be consumed. Kosher meat, interestingly, will be permitted to be eaten by Muslims because it is slaughtered in a similar way to halal. So unlike my other groups, unlike the other groups that I was talking about, I want to share a little bit about prohibited foods. This includes pork and pork products, animals slaughtered in the name of anyone but God, blood and blood byproducts, rabbits, No gelatins, because it's difficult to know if that is how that was slaughtered. Intoxicants in alcoholic beverages. Vegetarian cuisine is halal if it does not contain alcohol. Next slide, please. So what that brings us to are popular ingredients, including onion, lemon, tomato, lettuce, cucumbers, rice flour, bulgur, halal meats, chickpeas, fava beans, fish. If originally had scales and died after being lifted out of the water. Cheese. Seasoning includes, popular ones are garlic, olive oil, parsley, mint, teas, and coffee. And so according to a food bank in the Midwest, the most popular requests at a food bank from food bank clients include, from Muslim food bank clients include rice flour, halal meat, baby formula, oil, cereal, pasta, lentils, powdered milk, canned fruits and vegetables, dried beans, sugar, and diapers. Boy, have I done enough talking, right? Now it's time to practice. So what I would like you to do is get into 3 different groups. And then I'll tell you what you're going to do next. 3 different groups. And if you can be as even as possible, that will keep it fair, because we love to gamify. Okay, as you find your way into 3 groups, this is what I would like you to do. Each group you're going to need to work together. And we do definitely need another group right here, please. I went a little over the top at Big Lots last night, I have to admit, but I love Big Lots because Big Lots is an interesting next step from some grocery stores. They donate to Big Lots if they have too much, so I thought that it might align with some of the products that you see. As you get your 2 bags of groceries, I would like you to separate it out into 3 different piles. One pile is a pile that is really adhering to the food way of that group. The middle pile is one that would be appropriate, but arguably maybe not fully in the food way of that group, but maybe we'll say part of acculturation. The third group we will designate as culturally inappropriate, not a good type of food to make available for that group, okay? So you guys are going to be sorting for Jamaican foodways. You're standing, you're my people. So we are gonna work on, I'll be right back, we're gonna talk about Muslim foodways, okay? Oh boy, ready? Cinco de Mayo! You guys are working on ethnic Latino and Hispanic populations, okay? Michael's gonna be your facilitator. And I really want you to use your own knowledge. I can only share with you what I know. You guys are a fantastic resource for each other, so fill in the gaps. Same for you guys. I'll be right back. Fill in the gaps. If you know more about Jamaican foodways, please fill in that gap. We are going to get back together in 15 minutes. 15 minutes? Can we do it? Working together?
Well, I thought I would
Yes,
be
you
too
do.
helpful here.
No, we want your help.
Look, you already corrected me.
Okay.
Come. Okay, so let me go get our groceries. So who wants to sort? I'm just going to facilitate. So we'll do 3 piles. 3 piles. One that is in line with the foodway, one that would still be appropriate but not in line with the foodway, and a third that is culturally not appropriate. So jump on in.
I think everyone should be welcome to
Yeah,
start.
yeah, yeah.
Sure. active learning, active learning. I already know what's in there.
Down there.
How many classes now?
Three.
Three classes.
So it's probably
Anything? No blood? Yeah. Oh, you did? Yeah.
This doesn't look like it has chicken in it.
peanut butter crackers, I think. Sorry. I'm learning too. I love it. It's great. Well,
Yeah.
So, okay, the next question. How would you know that was
Yeah, that's very, for me, like I read, but I just didn't practice, but I didn't read in the diet. But for me, I would eat any plant as long as it's not full. But some people are strict and this, the science says some people have, but in Vermont, it's hard to find, especially even in southern Vermont. Yeah, and it's in the Quran. So I guess like probably the way one family for example, yeah, maybe we can just like even in a situation where we can't find food, you are without eating or blood, or in a situation where you can't find. So it's even, you know, it's, I became very bad. My sister would, for example, like a Greek salad.
Yeah, exactly. Also, sort of like.
Yeah, I don't pork because I'm used to it and the taste and the flavor. I do check to go with me. Cheese okay. Yeah, cheese, any cheese is fine. Because cheese comes in a store and it does not have meat. So usually, what's about the diet is the meat. Especially pork, you can. Things from pork, you can. That's why
Gelatin, right, and that's, I put that into.
that's good.
And to be tricky, yeah.
A lot of gelatin comes from cheeses, milk, eggs, as long as they do not have light, they have a yeah, a very traditional Jewish yeah, food does not maybe it's more just like recognizing like I've met some that's saying and in this they asked me, I had a chef, I worked with a chef, like Jewish chef, so he would not eat like a lot of things.
It's like a hair problem. Usually like when you're in a food shelf, like this is sort of like most of the people who are doing shopping.
So this is sardines. Sardines
Is, yeah.
So you're trying to sort of like.
Sardines is perfect. Yeah. So when it comes to fish fry, fishes, we do not with fish. We do not take it and practice because we bring a lot to study. It has to be square. And some of our dishes out of the army. And I guess I feel like some kind of the same way that I so yeah, just kind of I don't actually know. We should be some occasion. And you don't just take the element as one concern, and you just, some people take the element and no, you take the element and try to keep it as gentle as comes down, and then what you see that, like, you really make the element really solid, and just to see it, you don't see the element like skill or anything, just put your hands around it. Really, and of course, have to feed it before you just take the animal like, you know, not to you, and it shows a bigger than I because I see right now. So I have to see like them, put them down, make them relax. And just something. I don't want to take the whole conversation. What about the spice? Yeah, the spice calculation. I know what you guys were planning to start. Kids powder, it's still 55. Most green spice. And sometimes they are beginning to the spice. Product animals. I think that have to be had. But the problem is that they put like they send something and they say, oh, examine this one. That's perfect. So sometimes they put food turkey stuff or chicken stuff. And that gives somebody else a very hard. So I could be on the floor and just start like for me, I'm not doing really. It's just it's so, you know, food, I mean, you have to worry about the names. It's very good resource. Well, thanks. It's big diet, yeah, this is big diet, and it is special seniors, it's some from here. Right. And the very good is yeah, this is like snack. I have to see. So this is very common, they make hummus from it. So hummus is very common, so it's actually hummus. Chickpeas, it's called.
I'm gonna start bringing us back.
It's not just a product. So technically you cannot make hummus without chickpeas. Make something like hummus.
I'm gonna start bringing us back. But stay in your groups.
I have got hummus from winter. So I looked at the ingredients. It's not like chickpeas. It cannot be hummus. Because you got hummus, anything grind it or fine grind it like this is
If you don't mind, I'm gonna bring us back. But I have to say that if you could stay where you're seated just for another moment. But in my opinion, this is where the magic happens. This is where the magic happens. This is so much more important than anything that I have to say. But I do want to give each group an opportunity to, if you have something that you want to share about your experience or fill in any gaps in what I presented to you, or anything that kind of emerged during this activity, let's kind of go from group to group. Let's take about 2 minutes maximum to stay on track, and then we'll finish up the workshop today. So starting with the Jamaican group, is there anything that emerged from your conversation?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's really hard to make these decisions without consulting anybody with any like direct sort of connection to the group you're trying to pick foods for. It's really difficult. It's sort of problematic. And second, it's really hard to put things in a category of like no, it's like absolutely not, because it feels like there's a potential that you're sort of denying people a choice based on an assumption that you're making about them, which is sort of uncomfortable.
A lot of these go. There's no necessary religious or cultural restrictions on foods in Jamaica. So we're
also saying that there's a lot of different cultural backgrounds that influence, like you pointed out in the slides, and so one individual might have more influence from one cultural background, and so to make an assumption that one food fits them because it's a general Jamaican food might be incorrect.
Middle group, please. If somebody could speak for a couple minutes, we might have our designated speaker or a summarizer. We were so lucky. I recruited a little bit, and I'm so glad I did because I learned so much. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing some of the key things.
So in Muslim, as I said before, there are over 1 billion Muslims. As a result, you have over 1 billion view what to eat or drink. So I cannot really, if I want to strictly speak about the Muslim diet, I would assume at least 8% of the things Muslim would not be able to eat, because it's very strict diet. But at the same time, God would not, it's in the Quran, God will not ask you to do what you cannot do, it's really above your ability. And when it's come to Muslim diet, if you can think of it as Jewish diet, tradition Jewish diet, who doesn't eat like some of the seafood, like shrimp, who doesn't drink alcohol. It's basically the same as Muslim people in general. They are allowed to eat whatever Jewish people can eat. So it's the same diet. And there's, in the Quran, there's a very clear idea what to eat and what not to eat. So God said, forbid Muslim from dead animals. So if the animal been dead, you cannot eat it. It's forbidden, the dead animal. And blood, you cannot really just blood. And this is the liver, because the liver is, it's 90% blood, I would assume. So it's the only thing you can't eat liver if you, of course you have to cook it. And pork, you cannot eat pork, and also you cannot eat whatever, we are talking about animals, we are not talking about vegetables, and you cannot eat whatever thing was killed in the name of anything but God. It has to be for God. So when you terminate the animal, it has to be the specific process you have to do, and you have to let the blood go out. You have to be smooth, nice, and take it easy with the animal, prepare the animal, not scare it, and also alcohol. So these the major thing to think of: alcohol, no blood, no dead animal, and nothing was not mentioned. The name of God was not mentioned, and no pork. Some of the seafood are for the Muslim diet, like fish, I think. But for me, I'm very flexible. I lived in Vermont for 11 years, and I feel comfortable eating whatever I feel comfortable with. The only thing I not really adjusted to eat is some of the seafood and pork, because I never had it for 29 years and didn't have it. So all of a sudden you tell me to eat pork or shellfish, it's just too much for me. But like pork, like tuna or turkey, I would eat it. It's fine with me. And I look at the ingredient. I'm careful maybe about too much oil in the food or too much processed, more than if it has a little meat, was not halal or anything. So it's more individual. Really just has become more and more individual. It's your individuality, how you see Islam. So it's not really Islam or one whole idea.
So
Okay.
helpful, thank you. Thank you. I also wanted to make a correction that rabbits are okay to be eaten by Muslims.
Yes.
There might be different, I'm wondering if there could be a regional interpretation.
Culture. I think it's culture thing, not religious, because in
Cultural,
yeah.
okay, wonderful,
In Egypt,
that's so helpful to
in
know.
Egypt, it's very common and very famous food in Egypt, rabbit.
Okay.
Nonetheless, I have never had rabbit. Because I'm not from Egypt, so I never had rabbits. Okay. And it's okay to eat it, but I don't think I will ever have it because I don't know how my body would react to it. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Final group, if you could please share with us what emerged in your discussion.
I'll say we kind of laid everything out, and then we're going through and seeing like what we could move around. And I think kind of what came up a little bit was thinking about how some sites like Mexico City might be heavily influenced by the United States. So like one particular item here, we had like the Haribo Happy Cola gummies, which at first we were thinking, would be down at the no side. But then when we start thinking about how grocery stores have come into like Mexico City and those areas, and how soda is such a big commodity now, that maybe putting it in the middle as like a possible thing, because looking at it as like a celebratory treat or something like that, so kind of looking at those different things. Anybody else want to add?
Thank you. So with that in mind, a couple of ideas emerged. First of all, it's really hard to make these decisions without that knowledge. I think the best example is we were so lucky to have a person in our group that could really speak to their own local experience, their own personal knowledge. And the difference that we experience is that we were able to have you share with us your foodways, and that empowered us, at least for you, to make certain decisions. Making assumptions is very hard. There are many perspectives. And the key is that I want you to walk out of here with is begin to have this experience. Think about the types of foods that you have, but be very careful to categorize. Because without working with your clients from those regions, from those backgrounds, from those ethnicities and races, and all other forms of diversity, you are just making assumptions. But by starting to have this practice, I hope that it opens up the door to gather that knowledge. But also, I think one of the best concepts coming out of this is that there is still that individual choice, that individual interpretation. So although you can do all of that research, please also create an environment where people still have the right for autonomy, that they can make those choices. If you don't mind hitting the next slide, thank you. So my bottom line is, as members of the community who are helping with food access, please make sure as much as possible that there is a cultural awareness, and by gathering this information, serve your clients in a way that is culturally appropriate. If you don't mind hitting the next slide. Culturally appropriate, there's the star. Okay, and one more, please. Thank you for coming today. I hope that you were able to gain some new tools. I certainly did. Thank you very much. And I'm open to questions if anybody would like to stay. Otherwise, we're going to be ending on time. Thank you.